At the eve of the new millennium, is it still possible to interact in philosophy without tool of irony? I'd say no. Even the simpler problems are unaffordable if we are not able to use the precious invention of Socrates. Why so? Philosophy lies in dialogue, and dialogue is made of mutual comprehension, of linguistic game, as Wittgenstein said. Irony is at the same time a great departing and arrival point of this process. A departing point for when the participants of the dialogical process start to analyze the situation, it is very useful to underline the doxa component about the analyzed topic, and a very ultimate arrival point for laughing with somebody is the measure contact point with the linguistic game that a linguistic game can reach. The problem that stays now is that a lot of philosophers in history seems to be very able in philosophizing without any kind of irony. Philosophers like Kant, Nietzsche, or Marx itself seems to be completely able to do their job without any kind of humor, or even without dialogue, we could say. Behind the distinction between dialogical and monological philosophers, there is just a single way to philosophize. And no one in the history of philosophy never been able to avoid it, even when they tried very hard. Simply because if you don't do it, then how can you change the thing? You can dialogue with yourself if you want, and use part of truth only in your mind. But if you don't use it at all, you just never discover a thing. You stay stuck in the ready-made truth that your society gives you. My intervention then will be about why we have the moral duty and need to show that process even outside. Because if we show just the result of irony, we will always give fishes to our readers and clients, and we will never teach them to fish. It's all Ward's fault. He had to continue being a chemist, but no, he just had to become a literary fancier. Had he written just one book, taken just a second degree, or maybe a third, but no, he had to go and study American Indians. And not in books, for real. By living with them, he started writing letters about the consequence of those strange people. He thought he was talking about anthropology, and he ended up destroying the basis of ordinary logic. Okay, maybe not. Let's not exaggerate. Not destroy. Undermine? No, not even that. What's certain is that Benjamin Lee Ward discovered that there was not just one possible logic. He discovered that Aristotle had identified a totally arbitrary system, one of many, functional, genius if you like, but without the exclusive rights. Luckily Aristotle was dead, otherwise who knows the shock he might have had. As long as we were talking about relativism in the words of Hume or even James, it wasn't too serious. Old theories, old stories, at least ordinary people thought they were. And to tell the truth, also a large number of philosophers thought the same. Those who refer to materialism, for instance, the most serious and reasonable, those for whom say whatever you want, but this table exists, can't you see it? Instead, in 1938, Benjamin Lee Ward observed tribes that did not contemplate the concept of space and time. That was quite a problem. He started with hobbies, and they helped the world in a different way from ours. But at least they divided it. Then wars came, the Nazis. They didn't even divide it. We cannot even imagine a language with only nouns or only verbs, and therefore, if no fixed category is imaginable for everyone, end of categories as a parameter, in a word, end of absolute categories. In 1938, therefore, even if the world did not know about it yet, absolute truth was dead. Reality was finally a human series of random perceptions. And the most interesting question to answer came up. The question I have here today to try and answer. How can you create a morality in a world where everything is related? Not in a reality where everything is related only for people that think to know everything, just a reality where everything is related for all human beings. In a reality in which all the representatives of all cultures sat down on a table, they would not be in agreement about any ontological assumption. The response of the international community was initially very simple and effective. The strongest imposed his own morality, imposing first his ontology, not through just one or more wars, but above all through a spectacular Edwardian invasion. It was not a bad solution. The Western Empire lasted nearly a century of glory thanks to this system, but we find ourselves contemplating a phase of transition. The last one of this system pushed more and more to access the privilege of the first one, and it's clear that there are not enough resources to provide them with this privilege. The image of that semi-divine surplus of useless and damaging consumption that nourished the eyes of the less fortunate until making them march today like a battalion toward the growth of the PIL is strongly due to the fact that it is simply not achievable. It never was. But as long as we were far from the goal, we could believe in it. Now we are almost all near to it, and we clearly see that the goal itself was just a picture hung to a wall. At this point, the situation is as follows. The morality that was imposed because it was true collapsed in front of relativism. The morality that was imposed because it was strong collapsed because it made promises that couldn't be fulfilled. Everyone can create a morality in his own house and spread it thanks to the internet. But the two big morality groups that appear on the scene are those of conflict on one hand and of dialogue on the other. The first claims that we have to fight viciously to grab the few remaining resources, and second, that we must recognize ourselves such as to be able to find new resources and new lifestyles. All through I have all the letter, I also clearly see the reasons for the former, and I wouldn't dismiss it without consideration. Also because it certainly isn't a minority opinion. First of all, an opinion of this kind is justified by fear, which is always a bad advisor, of course, but a bad advisor that is difficult not to follow. It is justified also and above all with love for our partner, love for our children, the members of our family, our friends and acquaintances, love intended as extended egoism, which is good, I believe, only when it is extended to the whole human species. About the scarceness of resources on the planet, another major division, coinciding mostly but perhaps not entirely with the previous one, is that between those who see human extinction as desirable and those who think it should be postponed as long as possible. Despite what may be apparent at first sight, the overwhelming majority of human beings is inclined toward the first option. The extinctionists, I believe, verge on 99% of the global population. Those who want to go to a conference and sustain the need for human extinction or demonstrate in order to think is not an extinctionist, and there are not such persons. And nobody does that. An extinctionist is who, day by day, actually destroys the vitality of the planet. If you ask the question normally, almost everyone will declare that the human race must survive. But then, if you really insist, you will see that almost everyone asserts that the thing they can care for most is the pleasure of as many as good as possible, for as long as possible, for them and their children. The consequence of this ingenious opinion is the extinction of the human race. You understand this, but the average human being doesn't. Now, I want to assume that here in this room, there are many who think, as I do, that the survival of the human race is right as an important thing. If this isn't so, even better. If we want distinction, all we have to do is wait, grab everything we can, and bestly destroy it. But if instead we want to let shine in the river of history the ability that is typical of our race, and only of our race to choose not to become extinct, then we do have a problem. Because as I was saying, while all of you understand that hedonistic behavior is equivalent to extinctionist behavior, most human beings don't. Even worse, they want in each and every way very strongly not to understand it. And it's here that Socrates' method, so by Kierkegaard, comes in handy, the method of irony, which in the end is nothing more than what mathematicians would call reductio ad absurdum. If we don't have a good method to impose morality anymore, it may be time that morality rises from the interiority of our listener. It may be time to become skilled acrobats who make contradiction emerge from inside the soul, spirit, the human intellect. Perhaps we should always have done so, instead of writing boring treatises that have taken philosophy far away from human beings. Perhaps there is still time to remedy this. We must not be afraid to look like clowns. We have a plethora of philosophers who use irony as their main tool. In Italy we have Jordan Bruno, in France Voltaire, in Holland Erasmus, Russell in England. The entire history of philosophy has always been imbued by irony. On the social level, this huge resource hasn't yet shown his full potential. Why? For two reasons. On one hand, the famous philosopher who used it openly were always a minority, and were treated with great suspicion by all the others, who in most cases incited their followers not to listen to them, since they were considered dangerous and misleading thinkers. On the other hand, the populace took possession of irony, using it in two very particular ways. While a good use of irony comes from the identification with the community and tends to advise in favor of the improvement of customs and ideals, popular irony often tended either to rise from the distancing from common good, to deride the weak and those feel stronger, or to identify with community, not to work for its good, but to work for its short-term good. The respect of theory without further research, in a word towards its horror. For example, to get across the idea that consuming is good, that listening to intellectuals is for idiots, or that television is the only real place where a good family can be happy together. That's why in 2005 in Florence we founded a movement called the Ironist Movement, which idea, field version, I could say is this: let's prepare thoroughly before thinking about topic. Let's identify ourselves with the common good, and let's make an effort to see clearly the consequence of what we want to do before to do it. Let's use irony to stimulate in our consciousness the birth of a critical mind. Let's avoid imposing solution. Let's propose reasoning. In philosophy, often there isn't a new idea, and there is never a completely new one. And it's not up to me to judge how much and if this one is new, but what reassures me is to know that in philosophy is not important for an idea to be new, especially in moral philosophy. Above all, what needed is that the idea must effectively describe the time in which it appears and propose an interesting action in order to change that time for the better. And about this, I'm sure that an application of this method can really do a great deal. And here I wanted to end with a joke, but would have been far too obvious.